Good morning all, and welcome to the Power of Community Sustainability in Action. A bold title, quite rightly so for this session, I think. I'm Harriet Cross and I support the development of our communities work in Scotland at Coma UK. We do this through sharing research, guidance, best practice and funding opportunities for shared transport projects. This particular strand of what we do, I think, is quite an exciting area to work in. It's where you find creative solutions to challenges experienced by people every day and transport solutions that have been developed with every aspect of the area in mind. And so to bring this to life and delve a bit deeper into community-led shared transport solutions, today we will be hearing from Maria Davey, Operations Lead from the Isles of Scilly Community Venture. Will Parry, who manages Odrws I Drws, a transport project in Northwest Wales. Kate Hathaway of Kyle Community e-bikes in Cardiff Lacalsh in Scotland. Robin Coates, organiser Malvern Hills Car Club and e-bikes in England. And Councillor Emily Kerr from Oxford City Council and also Community Car Club organiser. So a brilliant array of people. Each speaker will have about 3 minutes to introduce themselves and give an overview of their work. We'll then move on to a couple of questions from myself for the speakers. And following that, there'll be some time for audience Q&A. So do please use the chat box throughout the session to the right of your screen. We'll then come to a close with my colleague Hannah, who'll update you all on our low emission zone work in Glasgow and Edinburgh. But before all of this, we'd like to share with you a video of a community project we've supported over the last year, a couple of years actually, and one who's sharing bikes and cars successfully in a town called Straven in South Lanarkshire. So over to Community Action Straven, please.
The vision behind having this project is that we want to be able to reduce the number of vehicles on the road, helping to reduce harmful greenhouse gas emissions, make people more active and make the roads quieter so they're more confident being on the road.
So I think what we've done is just tried to slowly sort of change people's mindsets. And I think what the main thing to do has been to try and take a much more holistic approach to sustainable travel.
My name is Sarah Sal. I work for Climate Action Straven as a project worker.
My name is Arthur Potter and I'm one of the project workers at Climate Action Straven.
Climate Action Straven is a grassroots organisation that provides opportunities for people to try sustainable ways of living. So that might include things around transport and housing, for example.
So I think the main challenge in setting up the car club has just been that behavioural thing. It's such an alien concept to people, especially in a rural location. So it's perhaps too much to ask people just to give up their car if there's a car sharing platform, but what we've tried to do is offer a bike sharing scheme as well. We're trying to get infrastructure in place to make cycling a lot more safe. We're trying to get community transport going, so buses. And I think all these different things feed into a much wider package of sustainable transport being much more accessible to people.
So thanks to funding from Coma UK, we have bike rental manager software, so people can book it through a calendar directly from the website.
Coma UK microgrant funding was extremely useful in funding two things. So the first of which was the car share keyless technology. The second thing that they were able to fund was the branding element of it. And this means that all the cars on our platform are covered with Straven Car Club, with the Coma UK logo. And I think that's been extremely useful in terms of making the community feel like the cars are a community asset rather than just being privately owned.
We have had some community members who have started making that change and having the bikes for a month-long period to replace their car for their commuting journeys, which has been really fantastic.
I think what we'd like to see is a much bigger expansion of the car club. We'd like to see much more community members putting their own vehicles on the platform and seeing a lot more people kind of buy into the concept. It's been a year in the making, but we're making progress. But I think there's so much more room to really make a huge difference to the way people travel.
Thank you, Dave. Hopefully that bit of footage has got us into the community shared transport frame of mind. Could I now ask Maria to be spotlighted and to kick us off with your exciting project overview, please? and any slides you might be sharing.
Hello. Is it sharing?
Currently
Was.
saying that you're at the end of the slideshow, Maria, if you could just go back to the
Yeah.
start.
Okay, from the beginning. Did that work this time? Yep. Hello, sorry about that. My name's Maria Dovey. I work for the Isles of Scilly Community Venture. We partnered with Hitachi Europe to deliver the GOVI project for the Isles of Scilly Council. If you're unaware of where we are 27 miles out to sea off the end of Cornwall. It has a community of about 2,000 people. The number of cars on the islands relative to the 15 kilometres of road were quite high. So in a bid to try and reduce the number of cars and also to reduce the barriers to having electric vehicles, we've introduced a car club. The islands also have the issue of the costly imported fuel, and we don't have a reliable all year round bus service. The innovation side of the project was we were testing the vehicles from the car share being part of the electricity network on the islands. So the batteries could be used for discharging the energy from the batteries to optimizing the grid. Also, the cars are under a canopy with solar, so we were testing how the cars could be charged directly from solar panels. We installed to try and encourage people to have electric vehicles and also to use the car share. We have 10 vehicle to grid car share chargers, but we also installed 17 public use chargers. Two of the sites we've got are classed as multimodal sites because you can onward journey on a boat or plane, because we've got one near our quay and one by our airport. Our business model is a sort of a low carbon alternative to owning a vehicle. It's open to residents and local businesses only. We didn't open it up to the tourist trade because I think that would defeat the object of the objectives of the car club, because they would just be used all the time. It's pay per use, turn to base. We have a choice of vehicles, cars, vans, 7-seaters. We do have a app and a website where they can register, and the app, you use the app to actually open the vehicles and unlock the vehicles, and the keys kept inside the car. Our successes so far have we got 200 plus registered users, and we haven't done an official launch. The reason we held off on the launch was due to some of the technical issues we were having with signal issues on the islands in various places. We are seeing a great uptake of the vehicles, which is good. It's great to see businesses using them and then going off and buying electric vehicles themselves, because obviously they still do need a vehicle. But it's also seeing people just making the decision not to bring vehicles to the islands. There's been some social impacts, and we have been helping different services for things like Meals on Wheels and different things like that. So that's been really good. It's great to see the uptake of it. We did have a few issues with signal issues with the complex of the system. And we're also getting to a point now where sometimes we've got to make a decision of how we're going to go forward with this, because the vehicles are being used quite a lot. And sometimes we're having lots of bookings and long bookings. We're finding that some of the vehicles are not available for those who just want to book the vehicle for an hour. This is more of a problem to the islands, is that when things do get damaged, it can take our vehicles out for 6 weeks because we've got to ship them back to the mainland. But it's great to see how people's views have changed regarding electric vehicles on the islands. Yeah, I think that's about it, really.
Thanks very much, Maria. I really liked how you laid out your presentation. It was very a really useful overview, and also very encouraging to hear that as a result of your project, people are now not bringing their cars to the island, which must be a big benefit. And we'll maybe delve into that a bit deeper later on. Could I now ask Will to be spotlighted and to share news from North West Wales?
Okay, so thanks for the invite. My name is Will Parry. I'm project manager here at Odrwys Rose. My hope is that I learn much more from you lot than you will from me. Otherwise, we're all in trouble. So Odrwys Rose is a community transport organisation set up almost exactly 20 years ago. Birthday celebrations next year. Our constitution states that we are to provide a community transport service for such of the inhabitants of the Llŷn community who are in need of such a service because of age, sickness or disability, mental or physical, or poverty, or because of lack of availability of adequate and safe public passenger services. So we employ 9 people, including 6 drivers. Unfortunately, no volunteers at present. We seem to have painted ourselves into a corner there, really, but that's a story for another time. So 6 drivers, and we have 5 minibuses, one of which is electric, all of which are wheelchair accessible, and 2 electric cars, one of which is wheelchair accessible. The other, a Hyundai Kona electric with a 300-mile range, is available to share. What happened was that European Regional Development Programme money was switched from buying an additional electric minibus to buying a quite snazzy looking car available for sharing. The main aim being to introduce electric cars to the Llŷn Peninsula, to give behavioural change a bit of a nudge, to remove the need for a private car, or at least the second car, and to reduce household costs, releasing that money to the local economy. We will reduce traffic, noise and pollution. What's not to like? The plan was to make the car available at a rate that's lower than the cost of private car ownership. You can share our car fully insured for £32 per 24 hours. What we've done is establish a car club. Members of our car club will be signed onto a car sharing platform. We use CarShare, car with a K, and the club pays the deposit. You book to use the car through an app, and the app then becomes the car key. So there's no need to leave the key somewhere or for someone to be present at handover. It works quite well actually. Once signed up to the portal, you can use it to share your car as well, though we've not had anyone do that yet. The lessons to date, we have to be flexible. Remember that we're in this to introduce people to clean electric travel. We go out of our way to accommodate on pickup and drop off. We're not too concerned about having a full charge on return. The charging infrastructure here on the Llŷn Peninsula is, well, it's non-existent. And charging from a 3-pin plug at home would take up half your share time. We could do this because the take-up is very low at the moment. We've only got about 10 members to the club, but it is sharing, it is increasing, and we will need to look at logistics as demand picks up. Our customers like the car. They like the car to be anonymous. It's not logoed up, etc. And everybody likes the drive. So watch this space. Really, we're a work in progress. That's my introduction. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Will. think the main thing that stuck out to me there is flexibility and your recognition that really to introduce people to clean travel, you need to be flexible, and particularly because you are trying to get people from A to B. So many thanks, and we'll come back to you in a bit. Can I now ask Kate Hathaway of Kyle Community E-Bikes from Cardiff in Northwest Scotland to join us. Thank you, Kate.
Hello everybody. Thank you for having me. Can everybody see my screen? Okay, super. Yes, I'm from Kyle Community E-Bikes. Kyle of Lochalsh is a little area up in the far northwest of Scotland, and we are just next to the Isle of Skye. So the Isle of Skye population is around 10,000, but the Lochalsh population is about sort of 500-600. And similarly to the Scilly Isles, you know, we have quite a carbon intensive island as well. And one of the, actually where we're slightly different is we came about because our project is very much about working with people with long-term conditions. So when we set up the e-bike project, we got some funding from so we got some funding from the Energy Saving Trust, but we came about as part of the Highland Green Partnership. So that was one of 4 area-wide partnerships in Scotland, and it was focusing on this idea of our green, our green pharmacy, and how we could encourage people to actually get out and enjoy the natural environment a little bit more, but also to think about sort of sustainability issues as well. So we received some funding, and we initially bought 4 electric bikes and a trike, but because of the topography here, we had some issues with the trike, and unfortunately it had to go back because it didn't have the torque to get up the mountains that we have here. Anyway, we had a steering group set up, and it was unfortunately the start of COVID. So we ended up, the bikes were used a lot by key workers. And then after that, we got going a little bit more, and we managed to be able to get a lot more sort of people using the bikes for short-term loans, initially sort of 2 or 3 weeks at a time. And the idea was really to promote cycling and travel in the community. We have a lot of natural barriers, obviously, with the weather, with the topography. We haven't got many cycleways, unfortunately. So part of it was to be developed alongside something called the Skye Cycleway, and that's still in development, unfortunately. But also to encourage a little bit of active, travel and commuting. So between the village of Kyle and over to Skye, there's a new fish food processing place which has been set up and brought 50 or 60 new jobs to the area. So we managed to encourage people to do some commuting there, and also the big thing has been getting people who are going through rehab, or they've had joint replacements or conditions like arthritis, etc. So we've managed to encourage people with long-term conditions to get on bikes, and that's been a really big part of it. So we had to do all the usual things, sort of advertise, social media, local community, newspapers, etc. And we've got quite a basic online booking form. We haven't got anything very sophisticated, unfortunately, but it just sort of ticks along, and it's been running quite well for the best part of 18 months now. And the project was meant to finish in April 2022, but we received a bit more funding. So we're still going. And at the moment, maintenance costs are relatively low. It just so happens that actually there's my husband and there's another person nearby who can do the serviceability and checks, etc. So that's not too bad. So overall, we've had 164 loans to date, and we've had a few repeat users because people are quite keen to reuse them. And we've also encouraged a lot of people to buy e-bikes as well, which has been great. So there's a whole village now just nearby where pretty much everyone over the age of 50 has got their own e-bike. So that's been a great thing. And yeah, we've had more women than men, and the average age of users has been around 50. and average loan mileage 54 miles in between a sort of 2 and 3 week period. We tend to find that during the winter, obviously the usage decreases quite a bit. And here you can see, in terms of long-term conditions, people with arthritis and fibromyalgia have been quite high on the list, as well as anxiety and depression. So it shows that actually it's been encouraging people to get out and enjoy the natural environment, which is great. So as I said, the project was due to finish in April 2022, and we're still continuing. But what would be great for the area would be have some sort of network that's set up where, like docking stations, because there's 3 or 4 villages within sort of 7-mile radius of each other, and it would be great for people to be able to sort of take the bikes from one location to another. So that's a bit of an ambition, but it would be great to have that. And I don't see it being impossible, because we've got quite an active community trust who are very supportive of this as well. But also the other thing is looking at sort of building on some of the tourism infrastructure that we've got. It'd be great for the bikes to be used in that way as well, bearing in mind that we have our weather and topography issues, which can be quite difficult. But yeah, for the most part, they've been a success, and it'd be great for them to keep going and expanding. So yeah, thank you very much. I hope I kept to 3 minutes.
Oh, that was great. Thank you, Kate. A really thorough overview of your project and very clear action, potentially for some audience members, but also for Como UK, to help you find a way to expand your scheme to some of those satellite sites in the Northwest, your bike share scheme. So that sounds really exciting, and potentially one that we can get involved with. Can I now invite Robin, please, to be spotlighted? Thank you.
Hello, yes, Robin Coates. I was one of the founders of the Mourne Hills Car Clubs, and I'm the current chair. It's all volunteer run. Could we have the first slide, Dave?
I'm afraid I don't have your slides there, Robin. If you're not able to launch them, then we'd still love to hear from you. If
okay, let's just see if it will launch. There we are. Can you see that all right? Let's just see if I can get it to slideshow.
Oh, nearly at the slideshow button.
There we are. Has that come up now?
Yes.
Okay, let's just go back. So here are 4 cars. 3 of those are electrics, and you see there's different logos on them. And that's because in the last year we've set up a number of satellite clubs. And we've done that because of people's difficulty in setting up clubs because of insurance. They're all together that particular day because we were fitting the automation in cars that day. Just a tiny bit of an overview. So I'm going to talk about the car club and then the e-bike schemes. So we were founded in 2009 with 3 cars. The aim was really to reduce people's carbon footprint, save them some. My main purpose was reducing carbon footprint, but also we realized we'd save people money. And we're in an area where rural transport's a really big issue, and even in the Malvern area, transport's difficult. We've now got 26 vehicles. That includes ATVs, a 4x4 pickup, which has got an interesting history, and a 7-seater. We've got 230 member households, so most households will have more than 1 driver. And there's 20 cars based around the Malvern Hills area, and then there's 5 satellite clubs in Herefordshire. We're insured by Zurich, which is really good news that they've continued to insure us, although they won't take any new car clubs. The last year we got a grant to fit automation, and that's with the Inverse cloud box and Zem2 software. So Inverse is German, Zem2 is Austrian. It's an app-based booking system which moves all the way from booking to unlocking to locking, and then does the billing and takes the money from the person's charge card. That's reduced our number of bank statements from about 20 per month to 2 a month. A massive improvement in the amount of admin we have to do. And we've got an RFID card backup in case somebody's mobile phone isn't has gone out of battery, or for those members who don't have smartphones. The Malvern Club is run by 27 volunteers. It's all volunteer run and always has been. There's been no paid staff. And each satellite club has to have 3 volunteers. That's the sort of, we've got a number of gates they've got to cross before we'll agree to put a car in and run it through our back office. The early development was assisted by very small grants, mainly from the area of outstanding beauty, who had Department of Transport, or no, DEFRA grants, which are called Sustainability Development Grants. And they'd give like £500 or £1,000 towards purchasing a car, which was a big help. Setting up the satellites has been supported by Herefordshire Local Authority, and the automation's been supported by both Herefordshire and Malvern Hills District Council. So if I go on to the e-bike schemes, since 2009, we've had a 2-week e-bike trial scheme, which we call Test Before You Invest. And when we first started, there were about 2 e-bikes that we knew about in Malvern. Now there's an enormous number, because people, when they do the 2-week trial and they trial it on their most frequent journeys in our very hilly area, they realize what a great boon it is. And as one of the previous members said, presenters said, there's lots of people in their 50s and older, much older, up to their 80s, we've found, who they've often had an operation which they're recovering from, or we had a young person with fibromyalgia. She said it transformed her life. So it can make a very big difference. But the problem is they've got to go on to buy a bike, and that's a big hurdle because you need a decent bike in this area. In the Test Before You Invest scheme, we've now got 5 bikes and 3 collection points, one in Ledbury, one in Cole where I live at my place, and then one in Malvern Link. And it's over the years, hundreds of people have used that trial scheme, and it's really transformed the awareness about electric bikes in this area. In 2021, we got a grant to start an e-bike to work scheme. We'd been attending local authority rural transport meetings for years, talking about how they needed to develop these sorts of ideas. And eventually they had some COVID money, which was designed to help people get out and about, which they put towards this e-bike to work scheme. And it's a long-term rental scheme. So the person pays £65 a month, and they can buy the bike at any time if they've got the capital. It's designed primarily for people who work or live rurally around the Malvern Hills area, which is a very big area, because it goes all the way up to Tenbury Wells. And they can't do those journeys by public transport. And there's currently 8 e-bikes in use, and the comments from people really make it shows what an enormous difference it makes for people. I think that scheme could expand enormously. We've also talked to the council numerous times about the idea of having a docking station bike scheme. We haven't yet got them to that point, but I think given it's a tourist area as well, it would be a really good idea. So that's the main things I was going to say, but obviously there's so much I could say.
Thank you, Robin. You have, I mean, that's a lot of information that you've provided. I didn't know that it was 27 volunteers only that ran your operation, which is really impressive. I'm sure people might want to know a bit more about that and how that's translated into such a successful scheme and how you've retained them, in fact, but we'll maybe come back to that. And last but not least, please could we have Emily?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes,
And
Brilliant.
can you see my screen?
we can also see your screen.
Excellent. I'm just finding the bit where it tells me puts it in slideshow. Is
That's
that
always
working?
the tricky step. Yeah.
Exactly. Great. Cool. So I am a local mum in Oxford who noticed that there were a lot of cars on my street back in sort of lockdown, so sort of May 21. And this is what my street light looks like on the left. And this was what it looked like on a car-free day that we had. And I just thought it was so nice to have fewer cars around. So I started looking into feasibility of having fewer cars on the street and the impacts that would have for everybody. So, you know, why should we car share? I think you guys all know this, right? But basically, transport's a huge emitting sector. Cars are very expensive and they're not very efficiently used. They're only used about 3.5% of the time. So it seemed to me that it was inefficient to have so much private car ownership. And then when I started doing research, it sounded like so did various other kind of people, including the government, you know, but widespread personal vehicle ownership's not so compatible with decarbonisation, you know, and the then Transport Secretary back in December at a Como event, I think, said that, you know, private car ownership is outdated 20th century thinking. And then I kind of looked at the overall sort of emissions impact. You know, manufacturing emissions are such a big share of a car's total emissions. So if you do the same miles in a shared car, you're massively cutting emissions yourself. And of course, there is the fact that if you don't own a car, you end up using one a lot less. So all of these kind of things struck me as being a really, you know, important for realizing that we could try and potentially reduce cars on our streets. I looked at a lot of the ways that people shared cars, community car shares, and you know, obviously Malvern's kind of an amazing example. I didn't really have the time capacity to set up a volunteer run scheme, or so I was interested in what could be done in a way that wouldn't kind of cost me any time, basically. And so what I did is similar to how Will mentioned in Wales, but kind of slightly differently. I just set up a thing. Peer-to-peer car sharing is something that's done by Hire Car Share, this is on my slide down here, Turo and Get Around. Basically, people lend their cars out for money on a kind of a commercial basis to other people. It's a bit like Airbnb for cars. So I approached Hire Car, who are UK based, to see if we could do this, use all their systems, but just in my neighborhood area, so that people that weren't in my neighborhood area couldn't see our cars. So it was effectively a neighborhood peer-to-peer car sharing scheme. And so you can see here on the screen, this is where I live, these 6 cars are all shared by neighbors, but you wouldn't be able to see them if you logged onto the Hire Car app, because the only people that can see them are people that kind of live in our neighborhood. So we were calling it a closed loop. I set this up in September 2021. You know, it just means that it uses all of the Hire Car's app, booking system, insurance, etc., but it's just ring fenced so that it's only in a local neighborhood group. And this is possible to do for, you know, anyone with a specific email address, anyone that works for one firm, or, you know, anybody that lives in a geographical area, or even a group of friends. Their system's flexible, and I gather that Car Share is flexible as well, although I don't work with them directly. I've spoken to them a little bit. But yeah, I mean, it's just, the idea was for me that it was just a very simple sort of thing to set up. I was able to sell my car a couple of months after launching it, because actually now we've got 6 cars available nearby. We also have the standard car clubs. Oxford's pretty well served for, we have Zipcar and Co-Wheels, and so people that use this scheme often also use Co-Wheels. We have a number of Co-Wheels cars around, but the great thing about having more cars available is it provides more flexibility. So you know, if you can like, you know, I know that I can guarantee to pretty much get a car whenever I want a car, and obviously that's the supply and demand matching is kind of one of the issues in the industry. So what I will say is it has no grants. You know, we haven't taken, you know, many. It's not linked to Oxford Council, although I personally sit on Oxford Council separately. I did that after I became a Green Party councillor sometime after I set this scheme up, so just earlier this year. So it's really not linked to the council at all. There's no admin. We have a WhatsApp group, so that is the admin, but I mean, you know, pretty easy. Like, just sometimes if I want to borrow a car for a longer period of time, I might email the WhatsApp group and say, has anyone got a car available for these 3 days? But that doesn't happen very often. Or you can just approach people directly on the Hire Car app, or just DM people directly, because part of the thing is, as it's in the community, you tend to know a little bit about the people whose cars you're borrowing. The big downside, I'd say, is it relies on people sharing their own cars. And what was interesting about this for me, and this is anecdotal, but is that a lot of people that are sharing the cars, we've got 8 cars, there's only 6 in the picture, but we've kind of got 8 cars. Not everybody, but there's a lot of people that kind of women that live on their own who are willing to share their cars in a community, but would not be willing to, say, put their cars up on hire car, you know, for anybody to borrow. When I owned a car myself, I did put it up to hire car for anyone to borrow. I was kind of more relaxed about that, but I think it's incredibly understandable that some people would be happy to lend their car to verified users in a neighborhood, but are not happy to kind of just lend it out to anybody. So I think we get extra supply of cars in a way that you might not, you know, in a public, you know, I'd really support anyone sharing who wants to share their car on a car sharing site. I think it's a great idea. There's also people sharing their cars kind of informally. I know a family that shares with another family. You know, there's quite a lot of sort of different types of car sharing. I think this type is useful for sharing a number of cars together in a community. Hopefully that is enough of clarity on the on what I'm doing.
Thank you, Emily. It was a really good overview of peer-to-peer. We're seeing communities move to peer-to-peer. A few schemes that we support in Scotland, and so I'm really happy that we've kind of got an array of different examples of how you can have a community car club on this session today. And also really interesting point about the kind of the impetus on someone sharing, particularly from a female point of view. I hadn't really kind of thought about that. So, you know, kind of delving into the personal relationship with car sharing is something we don't talk about. So thank you for bringing that up. So now we are going to move on to some questions for our panelists. My tech whiz colleague Dave will hopefully spotlight everyone and bring them together. And so I am going to ask a couple of questions that I thought about in advance, and then we will move over to some questions that have been put into the chat box. So do keep putting questions in if you have something specific you want to ask for anyone or for one of the panelists individually. So are we okay? Or maybe just a crack on. So my first question, which and we'll probably go in the order of the people who presented, it's around sustainability. Many communities that we support are interested in the sustainability of their transport provisions. So this might be how to make them financially sustainable, or to how to ensure they might be around in another 5 years, for example. And I wondered if each of you had similar thoughts about your own work and how these translate into practice. Just to bring that to life a little bit earlier in one of the sessions, Huntley Development Trust reflected on this in the video, and I think they answered with, it's tricky, is what they said, and but they are closing the gap, and that was in relation to kind of finances. So yeah, Maria, could we come to you first, just to kind of reflect on that question? I know it's a big one, but just some initial thoughts.
We're still under project funding at the moment, but we are coming to the end in May. So we are looking at different ways of how to boost the financial side of it. The insurance is obviously the main financial difficulty, but because it's part of the Isles of Scilly Council, we've also got some solar on various different buildings that we are going to be using and getting PTPs with those, so that we can use that any money made from that to boost the car share financially. The idea around the car share is also that the council use those vehicles first, and then so they use them as a car share, and then they're opened up to the public outside of that. So that helps with the financial side of things. Yeah, I think that's all I can think of.
Great, thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's useful. It's a sort of ongoing process and constantly thinking about strands of income. Will, have you got anything to add, or kind of in your experience around sustainability? Oh, you're on mute.
We don't think that it is sustainable, because of our rurality more than anything is the logistics at pick up and drop off. It does mean that we need to have more often than not that we need to carry people to the cars. We're a community transport association and we can do that, but to run it as a specific or standalone car share, we don't think it is sustainable, financially sustainable, really, because of the area that we're at.
Okay, clear answer there. Thanks, Will. Maybe Robin, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, let's talk
maybe in relation to Will.
Two different aspects. One's the financial sustainability, and the other's the sustainability of the volunteer model. We didn't have any trouble being sustainable financially to run cars and buy the next car. The problem is when you want to buy electric cars or you want to automate those big things, there's no way we can pay for those. So we need grants to pay for the big things like those big step changes. But the ability to buy the next car and add cars organically, we manage perfectly well over the years. Now, the reason we're able to do this is A, because we're volunteer run, so the cost base is very low. And secondly, because we buy what are called category cars. So we buy cars which have had accidents and have been repaired. And those cars are 30% cheaper. And we buy cars 5 years old. So we're typically paying between 5,000 and 6,000 for a car. Whereas if we were buying non-category cars, they'd be nearer 10,000. So that makes, and if you buy newer cars, obviously it's going to cost more. So our repair bills are dearer because we're buying older cars. So the economic model is really, really critical at how you do it. And the other big critical thing is the insurance. And because we've now got a large number of cars, our insurance has dropped to about 850 a car. So it's sort of bearable. The big issue really, I think, for us now at this stage is how we handle these satellite clubs, which we've started only because that's the only way they could get insurance. And I think the model that Emily's talked about is the way forward with satellite clubs. I really think that using that hire car closed model is a really good option, and adding in a car club car to a pool of shared cars. I think that's the model we're going to try and use in some of the satellites which are being successful. But the other issue is what happens to me and the 3 or 4 really key, there's 4 of us who are really key to running the club. And pretty much because we're all retired old men, we're happy to do it for love, but we're also getting older. So we need to think about how we cope with that. And the problem is the minute we go for having somebody employed, the nature of the community endeavor will change, and that will be a serious change. And because a lot of people are having to do little bits to make it work as a community. It would dramatically increase our cost base, because 20,000 a year, if we were paying that sort of money, which isn't a lot of money, that would be a part-time cost salary, then that would increase our rates dramatically. And our rates are really low. They're £3 an hour for the first 7 hours, £21 a day, but they need to be low because otherwise people will choose to run an old car. You've got to be positioned so they're going to make a saving compared with running an old car.
Thanks, Robin.
Because it's not in a city. If it's in a city, the incentives to join are completely different, because there's good public transport, there's on-street parking. If you looked at Emily's slide, you could see those houses would all have on-street parking. That means the inconvenience of parking your car becomes a big issue. And if you've got good public transport, why have a car? You only need one very occasionally. Yeah.
Very useful. No, that was a really good answer. And the blended model of peer-to-peer plus the addition of a car club is something that's quite interesting. And also the idea of what happens when your volunteers decide to stand down. You know, if the dependency of your club at the moment is on that, I think it will be really interesting for us to see what happens there. And so much is coming out from all of you that there's just not enough time to kind of pick apart and respond to. And so I just encourage people who are listening to follow up with our presenters and ourselves, because I think there's a lot of cross-pollination potential and kind of hearing from further activities from the presenters. So yeah, keeping the conversations going is really important. And over to Kate, actually, more around bikes, I guess, and sustainability of your model.
Yes, well, in terms of our model, it's obviously, it's a very small model, and it's pretty much just me, and I have half an hour of time a week. So that's pretty much it. So that's in terms of doing the promotion and encouraging the changeovers, etc. Sustainability wise, because it was meant to be just this sort of 1-year project, and now it's continuing, we're going to have to change the model a little bit, because the bikes have been free for people to use, and we've had a little bit of a pot that we've been able to dip into. And I just, and similarly to, even though we're bikes, but similar to what Will said, we're really challenged up here by the remoteness of the area and and I saw a comment flash up, I think it was from Dan, about the culture and changing the culture of people being wedded to their vehicles, and how can we almost make it more sort of trendy for people to not own cars and to actually embrace sustainable travel and to see it as being such a positive and good thing, and actually embracing it as bringing communities together. And you know, I think there's a whole sort of new marketing strategy that's needed in that area. I think long term for our project, we'll probably end up relying on the local community trust to sort of take it under its wing a little bit and be able to expand it in some way, because you know, with half an hour a week of my time, I'm happy to do sort of voluntary time as well. I think we definitely need to have a good think about the legacy and the sustainability, for sure. I don't know if that's helpful, but it's just making it real, I guess.
I think that is helpful, although I think you're setting a high bar if you've managed to achieve everything in half an hour a week. So congratulations. Emily, can we come to you for some reflections on sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I will say, and I think this has been hinted in the chat, is that it is probably more expensive. In fact, I'd say it's definitely more expensive to do it my way, but it's a lot less hassle. And so, you know, that's really worth thinking about, the kind of the trade-offs there. Like, if you can get volunteers and run your own car club, you can do it a lot cheaper. And obviously that's brilliant for a lot of reasons. You know, working with a commercial firm has a lot of advantages, but cheapness is not one of them. Having said that, you know, I pretty much price parity on things like enterprise and co-wheels, etc. But yeah, it will be, I'm sure it will be more expensive than a community club. So that's kind of the first point. In terms of sustainability, it's very sort of sustainable because it doesn't take it's no hassle, and they're very easy to set up in that you just kind of email someone, you know, hire a car and say, can you set me up a closed loop of this group of people or this type of email address? What I'm interested in the longer term, so we've just had our first EV, which is great. So now we've got an EV to share. I think there's a couple of issues. Firstly, some people prefer to borrow car club cars, and I think that's absolutely reasonable. They like the lack of, you know, personal, you know, having it done from a corporate. But it is easy to get your own car set up with a kind of hire car keyless thing. So this, as someone mentioned, with car share being able to do that. So if someone has that installed on their car, that's possible to do as well. I had that on my car, but no one else has chosen to do it. The third bit, someone's off mute. Could you mute? Everyone make sure they're muted. Thank you. The other thing is we're starting to explore the idea of having an EV borrowed from hire car, so like an and this is, sorry, let me start again. This is interesting for some smaller communities, so rural communities that don't have car club cars. So I'm exploring it with Charlbury, and actually Blenheim in Woodstock, Blenheim Palace has already done this. So Blenheim Palace is letting their own EVs, which they own themselves personally, out along with anyone that wants to join in that lives in Woodstock, and so therefore there's a kind of a collective shared, you know, people are sharing Blenheim's EVs, but also their own in that. Charlbury, which is another kind of Cotswolds village, you know, very, very civilized, very nice, quite posh, and lovely. And they are looking at renting an EV from hire car, but an individual renting it, or the car club car renting it, in order to then share that car. Our problem at the moment is simply supply of EVs. So hire car is looking at that as a model overall. People's borrowing a car from them in order to share it with other people. It's relatively more common in Europe, but at the moment we don't have, or we hire car don't have EVs to do that with, and many people want to switch to EVs. So I feel that there's a lot of limitations in this model, but it's also like incredibly exciting and kind of very easy and potentially high growth, but it's not an established market. You know, there's a lot of new stuff that I've tried, that hire cars tried, that I'm sure car share enterprise, I'm sure everyone's kind of trying to do stuff like this, but it's not, you know, there's not a kind of one size fits all established way of doing it, but I think it's worth exploring further. Does that make sense?
Yes, that definitely makes sense. Thank you. And actually it kind of segues a little bit into something that Kate mentioned earlier. And I was going to ask a set question, but I think there's a better one. Well, there's actually lots of good questions in the sidebar. But it was Dan's question, which you already touched on, Kate, around how do we change our UK cultural attachment to our vehicles? And I mean, there's lots of technical stuff happening in these presentations, but I think this is a question that we can get involved with. And yeah, so Dan's asked, how do we change our UK cultural attachment to our vehicles and get people sharing more? Would anyone like to jump in on that?
Well, the cost of living has made a big difference. In the last 2 months, we've had 15 new members, whereas previously we were getting 4 new members a month. So there's something, and also COVID led to a big shift. So that combination of people working from home, which means they don't need a car every day. The minute you need a car more than 3 times a week, a car club is not the cheapest option, even with our rates. So the people working from home is a big help, and cost of living is a big help. But I also think that more and more, the impact of young people talking about climate change, more and more people are going to see this is a crazy idea, that I'm driving around in this car. And the other thing that's pushing it in our favor is the cars that are being made are now so expensive. And even on a lease deal, there's so much money people are having to put in. And because of the parts problems that they've had in the last year with the chips, it means the cheaper cars haven't been made. So there aren't second-hand cheaper cars coming onto the market. So everything's pushing the cost of motoring up and up and up, which is going to help us a lot.
Thank you, Robin. Will, is this your experience?
What we found when our car became available, we went around all kinds of societies and institutions just to discuss the cost of owning your own car, as opposed to maybe sharing a car once a week or whatever. And we found the attitudes are changing, but in rural agricultural area like we are, people really value their car, the independence it brings, and it's almost a cultural thing now. It's that you know, your 17th birthday is more important than your 18th because you get to drive, and you know, the world opens up to you. Having said that, we found in the Earth and the young farmers that people are looking into it now. And this was before the cost of living crisis. People are looking into it. People are aware of green issues. But again, it's a hard ask in a rural community. And the ease of access, having your own car, it's so simple, isn't it? You just jump in there. You're not going to walk a mile. You're going to drive. You probably won't walk half a mile. So yeah, it's still a nudge that we're working on, and it's the only way to go, I think.
Do you feel hopeful that the nudge will work, Will?
Yes, but I'm not sure that we have enough time.
Okay.
In rural areas, because we've got a number of satellites in rural areas where the villages are very scattered, over several miles. And I think the combination of electric bikes for the young people, so the 17-year-olds, the 16-year-olds, get them in electric bikes early. I think that's going to be really, really important, and we're certainly finding that with our e-bike to work scheme. And then the main members who join are second car. They previously had a second car. So we're really cutting out the second cars rather than the first cars. In a rural area, people are bound to want a first car. But because they've got the first car to give somebody a lift to the car club car, the distance is less of a problem if it's a second car.
Maria, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think we are seeing a change of people's attitudes to the vehicles. At first, we had quite a lot of barriers to it, but I think we've been pleasantly surprised about the amount of people that are joining the car share and using the car share. We are finding that the new people that move into the islands are seeing this up and running, and they're actually saying, well, we don't need to bring a car, because for the very occasions we need one, we can just use the car share, so they're benefit from that. Electric vehicles are expensive, but we had funding for our electric vehicles. But it's also because it is such a tourist place that people are always commenting about the amount of cars on the islands. I think there is a feel that people would like to see the islands have less cars. And, at first when we said we were bringing 10 vehicles over, they were like, oh, it's just adding to the amount of cars here. But gradually we're trying to people are starting to realise the benefit that actually it is a second car thing at first as well. People might be giving up the second car as well. And we understand that not all people can give up their cars. Some people do, they need them for work, whatever. But it's been good to see that there has been a change of attitude towards the car share, and it is being used more, and people are, we know they're not going to just give up the car straight away, but when they come to the end of the life of their vehicles, it gives them that thought, well, actually, do I need to buy it? They will look at it now and go, is it financially worth me getting another car, or should I just use a car club, or maybe I'll just give it a try and see if it works for me. And that's all you can do, really, is just hope that people do. We have found that with some businesses, when their vehicles have broken down, they've used our electric vehicles and have gone, actually, when we replace our vehicle, we're going to go electric. So that's also a really good thing. And that changes sort of, having all the ICE cars around. So yeah, it's a slow process, and then you can't expect it overnight, I think, really. And then each little bit helps.
I think you've touched on something really important, and that's kind of happened. It seems to have happened within all your schemes. I think maybe Emily mentioned it earlier, which is people need to see it happening to then use it. And particularly in the community. I mean, I've been involved in lots of community-run projects, from growing local vegetables to setting up schemes to, you need to see other people doing it to believe that it's going to make progress. So yeah, I think thank you for bringing that up. It's an important point. Emily, did you want to share anything else on how do we change our UK cultural attachment to our love of the car?
No, I think just to reflect, what other speakers have said, and Maria talked about big changes, or like when a car comes to the end of life, that's one reason why people may look at giving it up. I think it is unlikely that we'll see many people suddenly kind of selling their cars. Although, particularly in Oxford, we've had a number of traffic changes, so low traffic neighbourhoods, improving cycle provision, etc. And that does make a difference. So I think the combination of carrots, i.e. better sharing provision, and sticks together is kind of something that does drive change. But, you know, we may be looking at generational change as well. So it's when people have a family, for example, that's a time when people look at buying a car for the first time. If they look around a city or a village and see that there's alternative options that you don't need to buy a car, overall, over time, you end up with the number of car owners shrinking, right? But it is much harder to get people out of cars they already own than it is to offer people alternatives to cars that they don't already own. I think that's kind of, you know, well documented in the literature. So it is potentially a slow change. And I think it is really important to kind of understand individual needs. You know, I don't know how any of the bigger car club owners manage car seats, but like that's definitely a big thing for people is car seats. Like, how do they get car seats for their kids? Another big thing is that apparently most of the large car clubs won't let people with dogs in them. So I don't know about this because I don't have a dog, but apparently, you know, you're not allowed to put dogs, understandably, in shared vehicles. And in community car sharing, you can, because people just say either they've got a dog or they don't have a dog, and therefore you can decide which car to borrow. But, you know, it's not, these are not at scale yet. This is all sort of very emerging, as I keep saying, you know, as a market, it's not established yet. But yeah, so I think it's shifting. I think, as everyone says, the question is how fast, and is it fast enough? Maybe not.
Thank you, Emily. Perhaps some of the audience members who are part of the bigger car sharing schemes can share their policies on child seats and everything like that in the chat. Kate, I've actually got a specific question for you. An audience member was interested in your e-bike use for over 50s. I was just wondering what the take up of this was. How many people are we talking about, and the impact it's having?
Over 50s. So I guess, again, looking at the background to the project was very much for people with long-term conditions. And, you know, for the most part, people with long-term conditions tend to, you know, not necessarily, but over 50 will be the demographic, really. So what happened was there's a village very near Kyle, and it's very much an aging population. And so that swayed the statistics a lot, because people were able to use the bikes, try them out, and perhaps they'd had like a joint replacement or some early stages of arthritis, etc. But we were really pushing it to begin with for people with long-term conditions. So I guess that's why we had the over 50s, but also naturally that's where people sort of tend to think, well, an e-bike, you know, I don't need one until I'm sort of slightly older, even though they're great for, they are great for our, you know, as Will was saying as well, and Robin, you know, if you have the topography as such, then they just open up. A lot of our villages are sort of low down, and the people have got to get out of the area first of all. So just even that psychological barrier as well of getting out. So and I think again the culture was that you know, people were saying, oh, I've tried an e-bike, it's great fun, and they were speaking to their friends, and perhaps it's 50 plus, and that's perhaps how it took off. Again, it's about that sort of culture. And I just wanted to mention something really quickly about the change in culture. One thing that we're doing in our village is we have a campaign called Lochash Loves Local, and we're really trying to encourage, we have an electric bus in the area now, and it's just about removing barriers, and it's for people to know that they can actually, that groups, all sorts of little groups and associations can then use this 8-seater bus, and to start using it for lots of local little trips or clubs and things like that. So just slowly chipping away and trying to sort of be seen doing things, and be seen that actually it's okay to not have to be in our little cars on our own, you know. So it's I think it's just that slowly that chipping of and changing the scene like that, I think definitely helps as well. So sorry, I digress from the 50s question.
No, I think these images of chipping away is, you know, is a useful one for everyone running these kind of initiatives. But there's also clearly a concern that is there enough time? But to try and finish on a positive note before I bring Hannah, my colleague, just to talk about our low emission zone work. I just wondered if we could go around each panelist and just share why you love shared transport. Starting with Emily.
Oh no. Okay, so I love it because it benefits the environment. It frees up space on streets. You know, I live in the city, so that's like really important to me. And yeah, so it benefits the environment, shares up space on streets, saves money to people, and is like a great community thing. It's really fun for us to kind of know other people in the community that are doing this. So those are the 4 reasons I like shared transport.
Thanks, Emily. Will.
I like it because the environmental impact that it has. We'd rather have fewer cars doing the same mileage, fewer empty cars and so forth. The economic impact that it can release household disposable back into the local economy. And it nudges, it brings about a societal change where people will need to cooperate more to live. So, and it is the way to go. I think it's going to become the norm. I think it is much more advanced on some countries on the continent. We have particular issues, obviously, with rurality, topography, logistics of it. But it is definitely the way to go. It's a no-brainer.
Thanks, Will. Maria.
For me, I suppose the shared mobility is, with electric vehicles, the environmental impact, seeing the less vehicles on the island and seeing people convert into the electric vehicles. There's also the social impact. It's opening up more choice of vehicles as well, because we do have like 7-seaters and that, which means people can join to go somebody can take all the children up to swimming club or something like that, rather than there being 5 or 6 cars going up there. And sort of the social impact as well. And we've had people that are saying that now they can take granny up to the doctors and then up to so-and-so cafe to go and enjoy a cup of tea up there, which they couldn't do before because they didn't have any vehicles available to them. So it's not just more going off, but it's allowing other users to actually have an availability of a car. I think that's my side of it.
Thank you. And Robin, sorry, quite briefly.
Yes, all of those things, and also the creativity it creates. So, for instance, we had somebody who lived in the Isle of Egg, had parents in Morven. They'd come down by public transport, and then they were a member of the car club when they were here. Also, somebody from Australia who did the same thing. People who now are buying short-range electric cars for all their local journeys and using car club petrol cars for their long journeys, which are much more occasional than their regular short-range journeys. So there's the numerous little wonderful things that come out of it that you learn from people collaborating and experiencing a much more resilient system.
Thank you, brilliant, Robin. And finally, Kate.
It's really hard for me to add to any of those, all the great sort of everything that's been said there. I love Robin's his comment about the creativity, and yeah, it's definitely, I think, and similar to Will, you know, we're going to be really struggling up in the Highlands here with the cost of living and the cost of fuel. So I think that economic side of thing will really sort of push towards shared transport. And I think, yes, reducing that sort of sense of isolation as well, that's a really big deal for people up here. And the more opportunity they have, and the more they sort of see that it's acceptable and it's okay not to hide in their cars or rely on taxis, etc., and be able to use cars. So I think that's a big thing. That isolation's a big issue up here. So I love the creativity side of things, because I think, yes, the more we can see lots of different uses of transport and vehicles, the better it gets, for sure. Not being defeated by our rurality, I think.
Thank you, Kate. That was a brilliant way to bring to a close the questions from everyone. Thanks so much to all the presenters. So much has come up. And yeah, I'd love to keep these conversations going after the conference. So contact details will be shared. I'm now going to just pass over to Hannah, my colleague Hannah Box, who's going to give a very quick overview of some of the work we're doing with low emission zones in Glasgow and Edinburgh. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a good day. It's so great to hear from all of you. Yeah, just to hear kind of how much work you're all putting in to shared transport in your communities is excellent. And you're so right. It's so important to kind of the future of transport in Scotland. So the project that I'm working on, sorry, I didn't really introduce myself. My name's Hannah, and I'm a community engagement officer with Como UK. I'm working on a project at the moment that's part funded by Pass for All to engage with communities in Glasgow and Edinburgh around the low emission zones. So obviously with the low emission zones coming in, that's going to impact how people travel, particularly for people who have vehicles that aren't compliant with the low emission zones. And I'm focusing on communities that are, impacted by deprivation or, are impacted with the ongoing cost of living crisis, and particularly families that may have a car that they can no longer pay for, they can no longer drive into the city center, and they're worried about how they're going to travel. So I'm going to be hands-on in a couple of communities in the Glasgow and Edinburgh area to kind of support shared transport access for those people. And we also have a survey out just at the moment. So if any of you, I know a lot of you are coming from rural communities, but if any of you are in the Glasgow and Edinburgh area and you think that this is something that might be relevant to you or relevant to people that you know, I will pop that in the chat. But the aim of this project is really to support communities to access shared transport, and particularly shared bicycles and shared cars, because we know that active travel is hugely important for mental health, for physical health, and it's hugely important for helping people access the services that they might need that might be in their inner cities that they maybe no longer be able to drive to, or may not just have trouble accessing in general. And also accessing shared cars for people on low income. They may not have a car, but they may need a car, and that would be hugely important. So I'm aiming to work with some operators, hopefully co-wheels and enterprise in these areas to find out strategies on how we can support people on low income to access these services as well. So I'll pop the link in the chat to some further information about the low emission zones, and also a link to that survey if anyone thinks it's relevant to them. But thank you so much for having me speak to you all today. And thank you, Harriet, for hosting. This has been really, really good. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah. If anything has provoked thoughts within you from what Hannah has said, please do take up the invitation to get in touch. And if also you'd like to hear about any more of our community work, please do go onto our website, because we have lots of events that we've done already where lots of different communities across Scotland have spoken, and the UK. And you can find out what's been going on and share best practice that way. And you can also join our forums. So all of that information is on the website. And thanks again to all our speakers. I'm certainly leaving with thoughts about flexibility, creativity, inclusion, and yeah, lots of things to reflect on. And also, please do stick around. Go and have a nice lunch break, and then stick around for our next session, pound, shilling and pence, the economics of shared transport schemes. And don't forget, there are physical drinks this evening. If you're a bit fed up of online conferences and you're in Edinburgh or London, there will be some drinks for you to enjoy. So yeah, thank you very much, everybody, and have a good rest of your afternoon.